Hey guys, I just wanted to do a follow-up of the last video that I did, which I called the immersion method. So that's actually the third time that I made that video. And the reason that I've made that video 3 times now is because, in my opinion, that is the most important thing I've ever done for myself personally that has taught me the fretboard. If I would not have made up that process and done it for myself and spent like a year doing it, there would be no zombie guitar. This YouTube channel would not exist. I would not have the knowledge of the fretboard that I do currently. That process to me is the most important thing I've ever done. Now, I'm not going to say that I invented it, because out of the billions of people in the world, I'm sure someone else has came up with something similar for themselves. It's just that no one ever showed that to me. No one ever taught that to me. I just kind of figured it out. My goal was to learn how to do chord tone targeting. I wanted to be able to keep up with the chord changes and be able to spot the chord changes. That was my goal. I inadvertently ended up learning all the notes and internalizing all of the notes on the upper 4 strings. That's what that process is really for. It's for the upper 4 strings. People are under the impression that you first need to learn the notes in order to be able to do that process. And that's actually completely backwards. You do not need to do that. You do the process first, and as a result, you then learn the notes of the upper 4 strings. The reason I say the upper 4 strings is because it's not the low E and A string that's usually a problem for most guitar players. Most guitar players naturally internalize the notes on these 2 low strings because we play a bunch of power chord songs. We play stuff like... So we play that like a million times, and over doing that over and over and over, we just come to internalize, oh, there's a G, there's a D, there's an E, there's a C. You know, we play these power chords, we play these movable bar chords like this. We start our scale patterns rooted on the low E string a lot of times. That's the strings that we just naturally internalize. It's the upper 4 strings that are really the problem for a lot of guitar players, and that's exactly what the immersion method process is for. So in this video, I want to address a question that came up, and this is exactly what I mean. This question is letting me know that this person is under the impression that you need to first know the notes on your upper 4 strings prior to being able to do the immersion method process, and that is not true. And I think this person's question is probably what a lot of other people are thinking as well. So let me just read the question for you, and then I'm just going to explain why it's not the case. So the question is, Brian, I've watched the prior version of this video and tried this method, and now watching this video, I find myself getting lost in the same place. After moving out of the first 3 frets position, how do you find the next position? Say in the key of C major, as in the video. Nothing shows us how to move or readily find the next C position. You move as someone who obviously knows the fretboard, because I've done the immersion method process. That's how I know the fretboard. For someone like me whose focus is to concentrate on learning the fretboard, finding the next C or whatever note outside of the first 3 frets is not so intuitive. Okay, again, the reason I know the fretboard is because I've done the immersion method process. I cannot stress that enough, all right? So that is one of the questions I want to address. So the objective here, we want to play a 4-chord chord progression. We want to play C major, G major, A minor, F major. So we want to play that chord progression here. We then want to play that same chord progression here. We then want to play that same chord progression here, and then here, and then here, and then all the way up the fretboard. All right, so this means that there's 4 chords in total that we're going to need to map out across the entire fretboard. We're just going to do it one at a time. So we're going to start out with the C major chord. Now, as I said, you only need to know the notes on your low E and A string in order to apply this stuff. So let's just look at where all the C's are on the low E string and on the A string. So you have a C here, 3rd fret of the A string. You have a C, 8th fret of the low E string. You have a C here on the 15th fret of the A string, and then you have a C here on the 20th fret of the low E string. All right, you with me so far? So now that we've done that, now that we've identified where the C's are on the low E string and on the A string, we can now map out every single instance of a C major chord across the entire neck of the guitar using the cage system. Anytime your root note is on the A string, you always have a C shape and an A shape available to you. So here's a C major chord played in the C shape. Here's a C major chord played in the A shape. All right, so let's move up to the next C, which is on the 8th fret of the low E string. So anytime your root note is on the low E string, you have a G shape and an E shape available to you. So here's a C major chord played in the G shape. All right, it's really hard to play that one in full. Not many people ever play the full G shape across all 6 strings, but there it is. There's your G shape. And then you have your E shape available as well. Moving up to the next C, which is up here, 15th fret of the A string, you have a C shape and an A shape available. How do I know that? Because the root note is on the A string. Anytime your root note is on the A string, you have a C shape and an A shape available to you. So here's a C major chord played in the C shape. Here's a C major chord played in the A shape. And then you have the other C up here on the 20th fret. Anytime your root note is on the low E string, you have a G shape and an E shape available to you. So here's a C major chord in the G shape. And then here's a C major chord in the E shape. I can't even fit all my fingers in there, but there it is right there. All right, so we just mapped out the entire fretboard for a C major chord. And if you recall from that video, I said that there's 4 major chord shapes that keep coming up over and over and over again. And then there's 3 minor chord shapes that keep coming up over and over and over again. So just to kind of remind you of what the 4 major chord shapes are, here's shape 1, here's shape 2, here's shape 3, here's shape 4. So let's now go back to the fretboard for where we've mapped out the C major chord all the way across the entire neck and see how these 4 shapes apply. All right, so right here, upper 4 strings, you have your shape here. And then right here, upper 3 strings, you have your shape here. And then right here, upper 4 strings, you have your shape here. Upper 4 strings, you have your shape here. 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 All right, you see how this is working? So did I need to know the notes of my upper 4 strings in order to apply that? No, I did not. I only needed to know where the C's were on the E string and on the A string. I then needed to know how to actually apply the cage system, which only requires you to know the notes on your low E string and A string. You see how this is working? I'm now going to do the exact same thing, but I want to map out the F major chord. All right, so here's an F on the 1st fret of the low E string. Here's an F on the 8th fret of the A string. Here's an F on the 13th fret of the low E string. And then here's an F on the 20th fret of the A string. So starting here, the root note is on the low E string. That means we have a G shape and an E shape available to us. We can't play a G shape because we don't have enough frets in that direction, but we can play an E shape. So here's an F major chord in the E shape. Moving up to the next F, which is right here on the 8th fret of the A string. The root note is on the A string, so we have a C shape and an A shape available to us. So here's an F major chord played in the C shape. Here's an F major chord played in the A shape. Now, people sometimes will say, hey, why are you ignoring the D shape? You're only focusing on the E shape, the G shape, the C shape, and the A shape. What about the D shape? Well, the D shape is just a part of the C shape. So here's your C shape right here. This is what people are interested in. They're interested in this little triangle right here. So call that the D shape, call that a portion of the C shape. If you want to play the full quote-unquote D shape and you want your root on the D string like that, you can play this chord like this. That's not super easy to do. A lot of people aren't really doing that. They're only really concerned with the upper 3 strings anyway. I just prefer to kind of play it like this because it sounds pretty. But this is just like a portion of the C shape where you could say the upper part is a portion of the D shape. It's all connected together, you know, so I'm not ignoring the D shape. I'm just focusing on what's necessary to do this system, which is knowing the notes on your low E string and on your A string. All right, so moving on, we're on this F right here, 13th fret of the low E string. When the root is on the low E string, you have the E shape and the G shape available to you. So here's an F major chord in the G shape. Here's an F major chord in the E shape. Moving on, here's the next F up here on the 20th fret of the A string. When the root is on the A string, you have a C shape and an A shape available to you. So here's an F major chord in the C shape. Here's an F major chord in the A shape. All right, so even though it was for an F major chord now, hopefully you can see that it's the same shapes. We're still using the same shapes. They're just built off of where the root note location is. Previously, we were building these chord shapes off C's. Now we're building these chord shapes off F's. But in both instances, we only needed to know where these root note locations were on our low E string and on our A string. So the next chord in the progression is going to be an A minor chord. I'm actually going to save that one till last. Let me just map out a G major chord for now, because to map out a minor chord, you have to do one additional step. So I'm just going to quickly run through the G major chord since we've already done this process twice. So like I said, every time you do this process, it gets faster and easier and easier. So we've already done it twice. Third time's a charm, right? All right, so we first have to identify where the G's are on the low E string and on the A string. So here's a G on the 3rd fret of the low E string. Here's a G on the 10th fret of the A string. Here's a G on the 15th fret of the low E string. And here's a G on the 22nd fret of the A string. All right, so coming down here, we'll start with this G. The root is on the low E string, so we have a G shape and an E shape available to us. Here's the G shape. Here's the E shape. Next G is here. Root note is on the A string, so we have a C shape and an A shape available to us. Here's the C shape. Here's the A shape. The next G is on the low E string, so we have a G shape and an E shape available to us. Here's our G shape. Here's our E shape. The last one is on the A string. Root note is on the A string, so we have a C shape and an A shape available to us. So here's a G major chord played in the C shape. You might not have enough frets in this direction to play the A shape, but just keep going until you run out of frets. All right, so that's for the major chords in this example progression that we're talking about. C major, F major, A minor, G major. We've already mapped out the 3 major chords of that progression. Let's now tackle this minor chord. So to map out a minor chord across the entire neck of the guitar, the process is exactly the same. It's just that you need to do one additional step. You first map out an A major chord all the way across the entire neck of the guitar. You then identify where the 3rd is within each shape of the A major chord, and then you just lower the 3rd by a half step, making it into a minor 3rd, otherwise known as a flat 3rd. So let's first map out the fretboard just for an A major chord. So here's an A, it's the open string, open A string. Your next A is on the 5th fret of the low E string. The next A is on the 12th fret of the A string. The next A is on the 17th fret of the low E string. Starting at the beginning, if the root note location is on the A string, you have a C shape and an A shape available to you. We can't play a C shape because there's not enough frets in that direction, but we can play an A shape. So here's an A major chord in the A shape. Surely you've seen this one before. And then moving up to the next A right here, which is on the low E string. When the root note is on the low E string, you have a G shape and an E shape available to you. So here's an A major chord in the G shape like that. Here's an A major chord in the E shape. Moving up to the next A, when your root note is on the A string, you have a C shape and an A shape available to you. So here's an A major chord in the C shape. Here's an A major chord in the A shape. Moving up to the next A, which is on the 17th fret, when the root note is on the low E string, you have a G shape and an E shape available to you. So here's an A major chord in the G shape. Here's an A major chord in the E shape. All right, so up till now, we haven't done anything differently. This is exactly the same as what we've done 3 times already. We just mapped out a major chord across the entire neck of the guitar, building it off of root note locations that are either on the E string or on the A string. We just have to do one additional step now. You have to first identify where the 3rd is. So I guess this would be 2 additional steps. So identify where the 3rd is within each shape and then lower it a half step. So I just call that one step because knowing the cage system means that you know the 5 cage shapes, or 4 cage shapes if you kind of want to reduce it to just 4 cage shapes. Knowing the shapes, but then also knowing where the 1, 3, and 5 is within each shape. So that's the super important thing. That's really where all the power of the cage system comes from. Not only just knowing the shapes, but knowing where the 1, 3, and 5 are. So if you've done that already, which I've said in every single cage video that I've ever made, I say learn the shapes and then learn the intervals within the cage shapes, then this should be nothing new to you. So anyway, let's go back to the fretboard and let's look at where the 3rd is within each of these shapes. All right, so here's the 3rd. You can see the number 3. That's where all your 3rds are. All you have to do is just lower the 3rds, and now you have yourself an A minor chord mapped out across the entire neck of the guitar. So there's only really 3 shapes that we were focusing on for the immersion method, the 3 minor chord shapes that take place on the high 4 strings or high 3 strings. So here's one of them right here. Here's one of them. 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 And that's how you map out a minor chord. It's the same exact way, it's just you do that one additional step. You just lower the 3rd, and then you have your minor chord shapes. So then taking this a step further, like if I wanted to run through the immersion method process and I wanted to play a 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression in the key of C major, which is the chords C major, G major, A minor, F major, and I wanted to play it here, you know, how would I do that? Where am I at? Okay, so I'm here. This is my area. I want to play a C major, G major, A minor, F major. Well, I have to find a C on either the low E string or the A string, and then I have to find a G on either the low E string or the A string, and then I have to find an A on either the low E or A string, and then I have to find an F, you know? And then I build my shapes from there. And that's how you play chord progressions in one small location of the fretboard. All right, so I'm not actually going to go through this and do this example for you. I'm going to leave it up to you, and I'm going to say if you want to play a C major, G major, A minor, F, and you want to do it right here, work through this process. You actually have to pick up your guitar, you actually have to put it in your hands, and you have to think and do the thing. All right, I'm trying to teach you to learn the fretboard. I'm trying to teach you to understand the fretboard, but I can only make so many videos. At some point, you have to pick up your guitar, put it in your hand, and just figure this stuff out. You know, you have to figure it out. Be like, okay, there's a C there, there's a G there, there's an A there, there's an F there. Okay, let me build these chord shapes. You got to do it. That's the only way you're going to learn, all right? So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next video.